On the lunch break of day 45 of the Undercover Policing Inquiry, Tranche 2, Phase 2, we've been listening to the live evidence of HN69, former Detective Chief Inspector Malcolm MacLeod, who was head of the Special Demonstration Squad between September 1986 and November 1987. I'm joined by Eveline Lubbers of the Undercover Research Group. Eveline, what do you make of his evidence?
What can I say? As far as we could hear it, because he's talking very slowly and very softly. And the mic sort of bending away from the microphone like this, or bending away from responsibility. So
Can I just say, I feel the pain of the technical people who are doing it, because I often have this kind of problem with who I'm interviewing. Well, I don't interview anybody, but I'm talking to people with a mic. But anyway.
Anyway, yeah. Well, he's slowly waking up. He can recall things, but he didn't know anything. He did not know that undercovers were having relationships. He did not know about anything about Bob Lambert planting incendiary devices, which was before his time.
It should be pointed out. I mean, it wasn't before his time, but it should be pointed out that he hasn't been asked very directly on those matters yet. He's given the impression that he didn't know, but the questioning hasn't really delved into those areas yet.
No, but we have been talking about the birth certificates of dead babies and about the impact on the wives of the undercover officers.
Yeah, we haven't asked
and
that.
He, about the first thing, he said it was practice before, it was in the system. It was the system. So I didn't think about it. I did not put any,
His exact words were that he was uncomfortable with the practice, but there we are. That was the system.
Yes, which reminded me of Hannah Arendt and Eichmann's trial of the how the Third Reich was built.
A desk offender.
A desk offender, Schreibtischtäter, which is the German term, which is covering more. It's just it's just doing my job. I was given orders and I just did my job. That is not like a defense you can. You can come up with in these days and times. He was sure that anything that came up, he couldn't have done anything about it. And he was asked about why married officers were, why they wanted married officers, and he kept on going
And I think he was very good on that, because he said it was put to him that was it because it would dissuade them from having sexual relationships whilst deployed undercover. He said, well, that was the thinking at the time, but in hindsight, I'm not sure it carried that much weight. Which is much further than anybody else we've heard give evidence on this matter.
Sure.
Talk on.
Yeah, he has a very matter-of-fact way of just confessing basically things that may not have been a good idea, but in hindsight. But should I have known at the time, there wasn't anything I could do about it. That's what he's coming back at, and that is a lack of reflection, or in fact, what we had the other week. In fact, I was a very bad manager because I didn't do anything about it.
He was, when it came to the safe house, he was more candid than anybody else, I think, so far.
Yes, in his statement, he said that after the meetings, people would stay behind, play pool. Apparently, the house is big enough to have a pool table, or play darts. And in his statements, he says beer was drunk at the time. And here he sort of tracked back on that.
He said that
you keep taking the microphone away from me mid-sentence.
I mean, he did say that he would stay for a couple of beers over a few hours, but he also said that officers wouldn't drink to excess, because they were very aware of what the law was with drink driving. Now, just to be clear, the law with drink driving at the time was 5 and drive. You were able to have 35 milligrams per 100 milligrams in your bloodstream. So in the 1981 legislation was that 5 pints of beer before driving was perfectly legal. So he suggests that they didn't have more than 5 pints if they were driving, but not all officers were driving.
And also they would go to the pub afterwards, still having to go home by car. So,
yeah, certainly. I mean, I think he was definitely the way that he described the safe house meeting, or the safe house piss-ups. Essentially, I mean, He said that it was very clear that the officers were expected to talk about their deployments, about the individuals who they were deployed against in the open session of the meetings. He said that was universal. All the officers did that. He was asked directly about Stefan Skutt, and he immediately started climbing up, saying that he couldn't remember anything particular about Stefan Skutt in relation to that. He was also asked about Mike Chitty and Bob Lambert in the same sense. He just remembers nothing particularly different about their way that they spoke in the open meetings. He admitted that he had more one-to-ones with Bob Lambert than any other officer during his time, but that was because there was so much happening with London Greenpeace at the time, so therefore you would have had to have. It was put to him that, why was this? Why did he describe the piss-ups after the meetings as being so crucial, was the word he used. And he said, well, because it was so tedious and tiresome for the undercover officers to live amongst activists, and that they had to mind their P's and Q's all the time. This is something we see in the Tradecraft manual, that officers were expected to mind their casual racism. It wasn't acceptable to be racist in activist communities. Therefore, they had to kind of draw that back in. And he really doubled down on that point, really, I thought, didn't you?
Yeah, but also it's like, okay, you wouldn't be racist. You wouldn't be racist if there would be a black officer in there, but you would be sexist, even though he talked about the team of boys and girls. He referred to that several times.
Guys and girls, yeah.
Guys and girls. So that kind of asks us to have a very good look at how the team was composed at that time, because I don't think we knew there were female officers at the time. But then again, most of them have their anonymity. Most of the undercover officers, we don't know their cover names, because there's so, privacy of the undercovers is so blatantly important at this point.
Yeah, he used quite often. He referred to the different times that he suggested that the public awareness of misogyny and sexism has moved on a great deal since the 1980s. I think he over-eggs that quite significantly about the attitudes at the time, but he claims that the use of the referring to the attractiveness of women in the reports wouldn't have stand out at the time. Now he looks at it, he realises that it does stand out. He said that it's only the public scrutiny that prevents the police from behaving in a manner that is in detriment towards women.
Which is really laughable if you see the ongoing scandals with the Met Police, both in racism and sexism and handling I don't have to recall them, but handling the cases of women that have been, have tried to...
multiple rapes by police officers, leading to numerous prosecutions of police officers over the last number of years. Yeah, it certainly has happened with a full glare of public scrutiny. It has not resulted in any real change in the culture within the police. He, when it came to the sexist banter in the safe house, he accepted it probably was, but he said that as a married man with daughters and granddaughters, he saw no reason to raise his ire at the language that was being used and the comments being made. I would argue that says more about him and his morals than it does about the levels of sexism and misogyny that was taking place within the safe house at the time.
Yeah, we all know, other managers or other undercover officers have denied that there was any banter or sexist banter, while we know for a fact, and this is confirmed today, that there was. And it's so much more honest to say, yes, it happened, and then sort of, put yourself forward as a miserable manager, basically, as he does now.
Yeah.
That is what happened during the last hearing as well, that they sort of maneuvered themselves into a dead-end street, while, by claiming, okay, yes, it happened, but, those were the days and that was that time. But they also, it also shows them as a really bad manager.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's been a couple of times where he's presented himself as slightly bewildered, I would argue. You get the impression that, he there was a few questions where I got the impression he got the wrong end of the stick. Particularly, I mean, it was ones relating to whether he, around the follow-ups on the surviving family of the dead children, where I think he was put to him a couple of times, but I think he was still getting the wrong end of the stick. But I get the impression that his lack of memory, maybe I'm giving him too much credit for this. It seems a bit more real because he seems to forget what he's not meant to say as much as he's forgetting things that actually happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But also, he's confused sometimes. But it's not a lack of memory. He remembers quite a lot, quite well. And he just, if he doesn't remember anything, it means, or that's the way he says it, that he didn't pay attention, or that it wasn't an issue for him. And it wasn't, the moral question. All over. That wasn't his task. He was just a manager. He was quite, that the fact that he didn't have any experience with working with undercover, specifically not in these circles, would not say that it would not make him a bad manager. He thought he was a good manager. Only now he has to confess that he had no clue of what was going on. Didn't pay attention, didn't ask, and didn't do anything about it. So,
I mean, I think it spoke volumes to how lucid he became when he was asked questions about the Animal Rights National Index, where he knew the history of the Commander of Essex Police and the individual officers. He had to be stopped from naming the officers because he was about to reel off the officers who worked in the office, about the way they operated, about how this was groundbreaking because it linked together intelligence sharing between all the forces in Wales and England, which had previously never happened. And then you contrast that to the questions he was asked about, how SDS officers were expected to formulate the reports and what was relevant and what wasn't relevant, and he was just really sketchy about that. He was like, well, I wouldn't. Why would I have any editorial role? He seemed really confused that he should somehow grade the quality of the intelligence that was going into the reports. It was put to him that maybe some reports didn't meet the threshold and should have been shredded, and he's like, oh, I suppose they could have been, but I have no memory of that ever happening. Which was, certainly he got that he was getting that realization during the questioning, or perhaps in the course of the whole inquiry process, that it was dawning on him that there were things that he should have been doing back at the time that he hadn't considered at all.
That's what's happening now. That he kind of goes like, ooh, this is not looking good on me at all. Yeah. And we've got 1.5 days to go through. So I'm very curious to see, where the questioning will go, because she's been, Emma, what's her name? Yeah, has been referring to. I'll come back to that later on. So we'll go back into further detail later on. So
we haven't really touched on anything about the incendiary devices. We haven't really touched anything about the relationships yet. These are all things yet to come. I would imagine, knowing Emma Gargeter, that's probably going to come tomorrow rather than today. She's at the moment, the last sort of 10 minutes of questioning before the break, and she says she'll come back to it after the break. I've referred to the psychological assessment of the officers, whether there should have been counselling available. This is quite a big area, which I don't tend to report on that much. There's not much of interest to activists particularly, but he said that there should have been psychoanalytic reports on these officers before they got the jobs. It would have been useful if they had counselling options from military psychiatrists during their deployments. That's something which apparently did happen later. There seems to be a lot of questions around that and about he claims that, like so many, nearly every former manager of every stage, and also not just the managers, but the other back office staff, the detective sergeants, have claimed that their role was somehow pastoral. They use this phrase comes up again and again, yet all of them display a shocking ignorance level about the actual sort of anything that would remotely kind of be classified as pastoral care. And it's this sort of idea that, we saw it particularly, I think, with Bob Lambert, this kind of presentation of well, what were you doing? Oh, well, I was doing this other thing. And it's like, this other thing, there's no evidence of you actually doing,
No, that's true. And it's like, there's this really a gap between the fact that they realize that they need some care somehow because they were lonely and they were they missed the police family, as he says in his statement. They weren't at home a lot, so they were really in need of care. But then nothing as such is being offered to them, but beer and chips, after the meetings.
Pool and darts, right? Yeah,
Yeah, go to the pub with the guys. That is what was said to them when they, when they end their deployment, and they were suddenly, in the first phase, they were given like 6 weeks or 3 months at home, and it was like, go do some DIY, rebuild your house and go to the pub with the guys. And it's like, that is not care. And they haven't evolved much from the early days.
No.
So it seems.
Not at all. There's a lot more to come. We'll be back with another afternoon of stuff from Malcolm MacLeod, and then we'll be back again tomorrow. Anything you want to add?
No, thank you.
Thanks for joining. See you all in a bit.